When I was broke, I had rich habits. When I was broke, I had rich habits.
Yes, indeed.
Welcome back to the Master Keys podcast.
Yes.
Season 2, episode...
Episode 21.
21.
All right, forever 21.
We'll get it right one of these days.
Super excited about this episode. Thanks for listening. I'm Chandler Halliburton.
I'm Neal and
And this is the Master Keys podcast. Please do not forget to like, subscribe, hit the little button thing, the little bell that says you'll get alerts. It really helps us and it helps engagement. Only like 40% of you guys actually do that. Maybe 41% because we've been hammering on this for the last couple episodes.
Chandler gets very happy when you hit the subscribe thing.
Oh, I like it. I see it.
Yeah.
I see it. We've got so much to talk about today. We're going to cover a wide range of topics. Just checking in with what the market's doing coast to coast. A little bit about the literal trillions that were lost in the market.
Things are changing.
Oh, man. The asset wealth that has disappeared worldwide over the last month and a half, 2 months, 3 months has been unprecedented. It's crazy. So we're going to check in on that, but also we're going to go to some of the major markets that drive our national averages, specifically Vancouver, the GTA, see what's going on in the housing market there. We also have some questions from you guys about should you wait in this market? Should you go fixed or variable? All these crazy things. So
we're going to give you our best advice. We are not financial advisors.
Yes.
But we're going to try and do our best to give you what we're doing and what we think is right. But yeah, things are changing like crazy. A lot of you guys have reached out and been kind of concerned. So we want to dive into it all. So first, I think we're going to start with our usual. We're just going to give a little update on what we're up to and what's going on there. And then we're going to dive into this cross-country news.
It's been a while since we've checked in on like what's going on because we've had guests and stuff, which is cool.
Yeah.
And we've got a guest episode coming out next week, which we're stoked on. But Neal, what's going on in your life, buddy?
I was really hoping you were going to ask me because even the last episode that I touched on, I didn't have much going on, and I'm continuing to park stuff. I mean, we're going to talk about why.
That's important to know.
We're going to talk about why in this episode, but I'm holding off on a lot of things. And like, you guys probably like, if any of you listen, you remember maybe 3-4 months ago, I was trying to work on like a 100-unit lot and a 60-unit lot. And I worked on them and I would put them under contract and then I would go to builders and the prices coming back just kept getting steeper and steeper and steeper. And the financing options...
That's the key. The financing options really killed it. Yeah.
The financing options were not great. And even then going and meeting with the bankers that would offer me the financing, they were like kind of suggesting like, whoa, pump the brakes. And then I'm seeing in the news that a bunch of big REITs are pumping the brakes. And I'm like, you know what? This is a good indicator for me to say, even though I'm super excited to get in and build a big building, I think being small, just getting into it, like this building is either going to make me sink or swim. Do you know what I mean? And so like I don't want a chance sinking it.
We're literally in the exact same boat. Only I'm further down the crap chute than you are. You know, like my permits are in, my expenses, my soft costs are through the roof. I'm right there, and I guess the silver lining is if I was mid construction and these rates just hit me. I would be in a problem situation.
Yeah.
Right. Now, when you're doing pre-construction financing, anyone who hasn't gone through this yet, they build in a range of possible rate increases. Right. They have to account for that because it's an
2-year process.
Yeah, it's a 2-year process. So they have to build in a cushion. It's similar to how they stress test people when they're applying for conventional residential mortgages. But let's all remember that the Bank of Canada said they're going to keep these rates low till the end of 2023. So when you start your development 24 months ago, you're looking at these rates like, okay, I feel good about this, and there's a buffer we're building in there, and that buffer evaporated in 2 rate increases.
Do we ever think that they just made a typo when they were doing the press release from the 1 to a 3? 2021 to 2023
I don't know.
instead?
It's like, I'm Ron Burgundy. Just misreads the thing. But that's how quickly it disappears. And I'm in the similar boat because I don't know, like I'm too young to have a legacy project, but like this project meant so friggin' much to me. It's right in my neighborhood.
It's your neighborhood, man. You've gentrified a lot in that neighborhood, and I mean, people aren't going to necessarily love that term and the fact that I'm saying that, but like you've done a lot of work in that neighborhood, and you've done a lot of things really great for that community, right? Like you've done community gardens, you've done a lot of work to the properties. You've even maintained rents that I would say are very low. Like you have lots of rents in renovated buildings that are half of market value, and you did that before any of this stuff took place. And you were always very casual about it, and you were more maintained about keeping the tenants and maintaining strong relationships and helping to build the community. Obviously, things have changed now with the way rules got slapped into
Yeah,
place, and nobody else kind of kept their word, and now you're end up biting the bullet because you kept yours.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I'm that much of a great guy, but thanks, Neil. Thanks for pumping my tires a bit there. No, it means a lot to me because I do love my neighborhood. Like I will be able to see this building from my backyard, right? Like I'm invested.
Most people would hate that.
It's in the distance. I got a pretty big lot. But you know, and I'm just right there, and I'm having to go through this right now, and we are so many months behind, like which what I said before has some positives to it. But now as we get close to the rubber hitting the road, I have to really look at this. And the difference is a massive amount of extra capital having to be put into the project. They're like, oh yeah, no, it's still tenable. Like we can still do this. We just need a quick extra like 1.5 million.
Yeah,
You
great,
know,
easy
like,
peasy.
That's what that rate can do. And when you think about, well, we want more housing and you know, CMHC just did all this effort to make these programs where we were about to see the biggest housing construction boom in the history of the country that would only be held up only by the availability of trades. But otherwise, it was going to be full tilt for the next 36 to 48 months to build the inventory that we all say we need to help with housing. And, you know, a couple rate increases by Bank of Canada and 50, like it just goes away.
I feel like I'm gonna just jump in here. We're skipping personal news for a second, and now that Chandler said what he said, I'm gonna start talking about it a little bit because this is something that I'm gonna throw out there as an explanation because I think it's gonna even differ from what we end up talking about through this podcast. But as you're saying, the Bank of Canada raised those rates, and now the cost of construction is so much higher, and so we're all certain because the rates went up, house prices are pulling back a little bit, or your volume of transactions is slowing down. But this is gonna be different than any other pullback we've ever seen in the sense that because inflation is up, the cost of construction is so high, everyone's stopping their construction projects, which is actually going to put a bigger pinch on inventory, which actually I think will boil out to cause prices to either level or increase, even though the economy is crashing around it.
We're getting
I had to jump into it because
I know.
you're saying it, and I'm like,
well, this is the big thing.
and everyone's freaking out, and I'm like, I don't. This is different. Like this is different. I have some stats here. I'll talk about a bit later, but just think about that concept before we go into this. Like we're about to say a bunch of doom and gloom and all these bad numbers, but this is different because the cost of construction is so high. They just can't. They can't give housing to make it go down.
Also, 400,000 people in, 200,000 homes.
Yeah, so we're gonna
Simple math,
yeah.
right? We're trying to bring in as a country 400,000 people every year,
Yeah.
and we have the capacity for about 200,000 homes, and we've been doing those 200,000
go down.
homes. Exactly, we've been doing those 200,000 homes with cheap interest money, like cheap rates, and now those rates are high. The input prices, the cost of lumber is starting to come down, but there's all these conflicting forces, and I'm super excited to talk about this. But let's continue. What else? What do you have?
I gotta say my fears. I got so many fears. Can I say my fear?
So many fears.
I have so many fears. Okay, I gotta say my last fear, and then I'm gonna go back to my news.
Sharks, open water.
Yeah, exactly. So, just following along this path here, everyone, rates went up, prices are starting to cool because everyone's a little bit nervous. What's going to happen to the market? What's going to happen in the market? So we think prices are going to go down, but there's no inventory, and everyone's parking construction, which is actually ultimately going to force it up continually. And there's planning to bring in more immigrants. What's going to happen? And I think it could cause things to really boil over in a bad way if the federal government slows down immigration. This is the boil out from this, and I think
can't imagine they're going to do that.
But I can't. And if that happens, we've said it many times on here before. Canada is in the business of people.
Dude,
we don't exploit our resources, which I know I agree for in some ways. In some ways, I'm like, we're killing ourselves. Anyways, I'm gonna go back to personal news now.
Yeah.
I hope we've locked you in for today's episode.
We're going to talk about all this stuff. It's going to be good, man. I love it.
Outside of that, honestly, my personal news, like I said, isn't exciting because I basically asked a bunch of things. I'm really not buying anything unless I feel it's like a out of this world deal. And this is even outside of housing. I was supposed to have bought a boat for my new home this summer. And I was just explaining to the guys, I got a boat and I got a deal brought to me. And they said, hey, this is a great price on this boat. It's a beautiful boat. It has low hours. It's 2 years old. And I'll just give the numbers. It was $140,000 for the boat. And I was like, okay, that's not bad. So I call my friend who has the same boat. And he just bought that boat brand new, 0 hours, for $96,000.
And the difference was?
So $44,000. That's 50% higher for a used one on market right now. And I'm like, that makes no sense. Just there's no inventory.
Yeah. So your friend ordered his.
He ordered his brand new from the dealer 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So he got it for list price, and now he can take it and turn it around and sell it for 180 grand. And so, like, again, something's got to give. It makes no sense. Like this is, and so now I'm parking that because I'm like, that doesn't make any sense to me to pay 50% more for something like that. And I can see it now. You go out, you buy that, and 6 months from now, the market's down 50K, and you basically paid $10,000 a month to go out on your boat 3 times.
Can I just make a request for some of the haters to take that clip and put it on a subreddit for like Neal's upset about not being able to buy a boat?
Yeah, exactly. There'd be some 1%er clip, and this is why we have the taxes on boats. And yeah.
And if you could use that new Snapchat filter where it just looks like he's crying like this,
Yes,
that'd be like,
Snapchat filter to make me look like I'm crying, and then somehow put me on the boat. If you look at my Instagram, there's one of me photoshopped on a boat. If you could use all of those and create it, I'd be very happy.
the real sad thing is that Neal already bought the deck shoes, and so that's the real.
I bought new swim trunks and deck shoes, and I'm not going to get to use them.
Oh man. No, listen, I hear you. It's so I shared this with some people just the other day that this project is very personal, and to not do it would be it would feel like a real failure. And it would be just genuinely disappointing. And people always say, well, sometimes the best moves you make are the ones you don't make. And when you look around and you see the smart people in the room that have all the money and they're pressing pause on things, I like to be contrarian. However, these smart people with lots of money, if they're saying pause, it kind of gives you pause. Now, that said, and this is the other thing, because people are like, oh yeah, like this is fear mongering. There's going to be no recession, blah, 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 blah. First of all, people don't understand what a recession is. It's not necessarily like the Great Depression when we're like, please, can I have some more? Like, it's not necessarily going to be that. It's just a contraction of GDP for consecutive months. There's also going to be a big delay on these things because some people are half built their projects, or they're right at the starting line, or maybe they just have the cash that they don't really much care. Those are still going to go ahead. So the lag,
have to finish them. It's
that's why the people are that are projecting this recession. It's in 2023. Because the other thing is there's what's called like stickiness of pricing. So if you have a contract and you've signed that contract and it's good for 12 months, an economic slowdown doesn't void your contract.
Exactly.
Right? You still have that pay. Anyone who is out there and has a job that is paying them $40 an hour, you don't all of a sudden go to your boss like, you know what? I hear there's a bit of an economic slowdown. I'll go ahead and I'll take $35. Right? So there is that stickiness of wage and stickiness of supply and stickiness of services that'll take a long time to slow down. But if you look at everything that's going on, it's going to have to slow down. The problem is, as you say, there's all these other forces that are buoying things up. So you may actually get a contraction of GDP.
Frugality will become the norm. Right now, we're all living high off the hog. Luxury items are exploding. The more luxurious a good is, the less likely you're able to get it. Like luxury goods are out of this world, and people who are buying all sorts of fancy shit that have no means or no reason buying fancy shit are doing it for all the wrong reasons. But it's because money's been so flush, and no matter what you were doing, there was an opportunity to make money, and that's going to turn around. And so even though things are going to continue on, it's going to be a change of lifestyle, I think, across the board. And I think this is what you saw in the 80s, where frugality was very important. 80s, early 90s, these luxury booms were not taking place. It was then this late 2010 range that luxury items really just became like the norm, and it went on this massive boom.
Yeah, so I'm going to throw out this stat that there was $35 trillion worth of wealth that was wiped out from global markets in the past, a couple months. And what that means is, these are losses that, yes, they might be on paper or in portfolios or in asset holdings, but that changes how people then go out and spend their money. If you look at how much of our market here in Nova Scotia was recently impacted by people from other provinces who are retirement age, who were kind of cashing in their chips wherever they were and saying, all right, I'm going to move to Nova Scotia. Well, if their portfolio just took a hit of 35%, which is not unreasonable, they're now looking, on second thought, I'm actually going to work for a couple more years.
Yep.
I can't go to Nova Scotia just yet. So that's on the one side, that's a home that doesn't come available in their current market.
Yep.
And then on the flip side, they also don't come here to our province, so that's less demand on the buying side. So it's all these moving things, but that's what asset wealth loss, kind of how that trickles down to the rest of the economy. They also
the ripple effect is enormous.
They spend less, right?
Exactly. Let's say they spend less. And when you look at a home transaction, what do they say? It brings $20,000 or $50,000 to the economy every time a home transacts. So that $100,000 from those two transactions is now lost simply because they've decided to pull back. It's gonna like, and then there's the delay. That's the other thing is people I think like are missing the fact that this I was saying a lot is that I feel like the rate hike took place and everyone waited for a week to see if we were going to be on the streets eating bread, and then it didn't happen in a week, and they're like, oh, everything's okay, let's continue. And it's like, no. This is gonna like in 60 to 90 days, you're gonna be like, oh, okay, now I'm starting to see what's happening here. And then when another one takes place, add that on, and it's gonna start to compound, right? So it takes a little bit of time because, like you said, contracts need to end, renewals need to take place, the businesses need to start feeling it. But I've talked to a few business owners that have, like, I would say, expensive kind of luxury items. They're not luxury items, but they're non-essentials, items that are kind of expensive. And they said they're seeing their sales already start to trickle down.
Yeah.
As of about a month and a half ago, they said for this time last year, they were doing better, which is crazy because we were in the pandemic.
The other challenge, too, is this is a time of year where people start to spend more money and you get more tourism. So, again, seeing the actual ramifications of this in the short term, it's hard to compare. Like, if you look at May versus March, right, people spend more money in May than they do in March. There's more things to do. Tourism comes to, it's hard to measure that. But household spending and residential construction are the biggest contributors to our GDP, right? So if there's less household spending and eventually there's going to be a slowdown in housing starts, right now, again, the numbers are skewed because there's more housing starts in May than there were in April because it's easier to break ground in May than it is in April.
Yeah.
But that's going to slow down. Interesting times. So boohoo, Neal can't buy a boat, and he's maybe like curbing some of his spending. Anything else new with you? So
catch me swimming in the harbor this summer.
So are you he's out there on the harbor hopper? Yeah. Are you looking at any properties at all right now?
I'm looking. Like, I'm continuously looking to find deals. Like I said, but it has to be an amazing deal that has to work on that front. And
why does it have to be an amazing deal? Because you don't see the short term lift, like guaranteed?
I don't see the short-term lift and even the long-term play. So, like, now that rent control here locally has been broken, most of Canada already has it. Having traveled a bit through Canada, I see where the rental properties are. There a lot of them are ill-maintained, and I'm now very concerned that it might not necessarily be the way. So I have this mixture now of doubt of, like, not getting the lift because the upward interest rates means I'm going to get to borrow less money. It's going to have an upward pressure on cap rates, so my end values are going to be lower. And then even once I'm done and I lock in, let's say, a great rent, if I can only get 2% for the next 10 years, I'm stuck. I'm going to start losing money. Like, if you take your spreadsheet and you extrapolate and you put in all your expenses, like, okay, this furnace is going to last me 20 years. My roof's going to last me 15 years. My windows are going to last me 20 years. Put all of those in.
There'll be a tipping point somewhere.
There will be a tipping point. And I'll tell you right now, it doesn't make sense after 10, 15 years to own a lot of these buildings. And so for me, I am very, very hesitant on buying right now because of that simple fact. And, like, it sounds kind of like fear-mongering, and you can still make money on rentals. But I think the other thing you need to consider when you look at auxiliary markets, like, well, in Toronto and Vancouver, they trade for $600 a door, $800 a door as rentals, but they have no rental income. Those people are buying those through basically wealth transfers. They're putting down 50%, they're putting down 65%,
Right.
And what you're banking on is the values being basically covered by the condo values in your neighborhood. Because
Right.
basically they're saying this is the equivalent of a condo and this is what it's worth. So they'll lend against it on that sense because the idea would be that they could potentially sell it as condos later on.
Conversion.
It's
valuation.
conversion, right?
Yeah.
But that means for making money as a small-time investor where there's not a ton of wealth behind me, I have to make decisions as if, like, this I have to look at and I have to extrapolate it and make that decision. And that's why I've had this full, like, hard stop in the last couple months of, like, I don't know where I want to go with this right now. Right. And like that, but that's just my logic. And maybe they remove rent control here, or maybe they increase the rate that you're allowed to increase. And there's still probably ways to make money that I'm not seeing, and maybe better run buildings and being frugal with what you do and really making sure you target the proper rents allows you to do it. And like things like student housing, I was saying this to someone who's building a student housing building. I can now see why student housing has lasted for hundreds of years of super high value, because due to the turnover, you actually
Hundreds of years.
literally, man, those universities been there. Like literally every property around Dalhousie is 140 years
They
old.
were having keggers.
Yeah, I don't know if they were having keggers
Two centuries ago.
back then, like horse and
The
buggy
original
parties.
toga parties.
Yeah, like OG toga. Like it's like wear your toga tonight. Like, what else was I gonna wear? But,
Well, which toga though? Which color?
But like in all seriousness, like I'm like, okay, now I see why these downtown locations and student housing areas make sense, because there's a lot of turnover. And
Yeah, turnover is huge. Yeah.
turnover might be a bad thing, but if there's rent control, turnover is actually a good thing, because it gives you an opportunity to clean things up. And it gets you an opportunity to get to market rents.
Turnover is the best. I used to look for tenants that I thought would stay for a while, and now I look for tenants who I think won't stay for a while.
Exactly. And these auxiliary
crazy.
markets
It's crazy.
might actually end up getting killed. And that's why when you look at a lot of cities, the auxiliary high density rental areas, those buildings are super ill maintained. And I think that's what's caused it in the past, because there has been rent controls in the past and they have come and gone.
Yeah, so on that cheery note, I'm about to close on a 12-unit building.
Apartments, not condos.
Apartments, not condos. Now that Neil said it's a terrible idea. Now, I closed that on early July, so I'm excited about that. That said, I also have, how many units under renovation, active current renovation? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 9, about to be 11 units under active renovation. And so the idea of taking on 12 more, I'm kind of hoping that the schedule lines up. And I'm revisiting that large package deal that I talked about maybe a month ago, where I couldn't make the individual parts less than the redevelopment play because of some limitations with redeveloping it. But I think there is some value that I can collect in the parts as is. And I facilitated a deal that sold off 2 parts that were adding a lot of value in their own right, but weren't going to add a lot of value to me.
Yep.
So I found a buyer for those, and now those are outside of the package. And so the remaining piece is more sizable, appropriate. So I'm looking at that, but it's interesting. I'm looking at it primarily as potential short-term furnished rentals.
This is crazy that you say that. I have a couple units turning over. And my manager, shout out Josh, if he's listening.
Joshua,
he's also handling, like you're saying, we have about 40-ish units, 45 units under rental right now, and he is managing that.
All vacant under reno? Yes,
and I'm regretting it because I realize how much rental income I'm losing.
Bro.
Yeah.
That's too much.
That is too much. But these 2 units came up, and he was like, do you want to try Airbnb? And I was like, you know what? Maybe. And so we went through the neighborhood.
Where are these at?
Bedford.
Okay.
And so, for anyone who's not in Halifax, Bedford used to be its own little community. It's about 25 minutes from downtown.
It's basically Halifax just merges into it at this point.
And now Halifax has merged into it. And it's where most of our new development is taking place for homes, single-family homes.
A lot of it, yeah.
And anyway, so it's become a little bit higher price point because of that. And it has great schools and da-da-da-da. But it doesn't have a ton of hotels. It doesn't really have a downtown core area at all because it's not really its own city.
No, they used to have a bunch of really sketchy motels, but they've all been redeveloped because they're on the main strip.
And they're getting turned into apartments. Yeah. So I just opened Airbnb, went Bedford, and I didn't put a date range. I just went and saw what there was. And I clicked on the first 15. I think the earliest we could find was end of July for a room rental for $80. Wow. But any of the actual ones that I'm oh, this is an actual apartment that's up for rent. They were booked. One of them I was oh, sweet, it says April 13th. And I was wait a second, we're past April 13th. Click on it. It's first available booking, April 13th, 2023. And
Weird.
I was holy crap. What it is, and the reason my manager brought up is he said a lot of our applicants are people who have moved here who are living in Airbnbs. And he said, we'll take it because I'm paying $6,000 a month right now to live in an Airbnb. And so a lot of these people are getting month-long rentals.
Yeah.
So I said, you know what? We got 2 turning over. We're going to furnish them out. They're nice. I think they'll have 2 parking spots.
It's also good while you're renovating the rest of the building because you can be kind of listen, I'm not. It's the building is under construction. The common areas aren't that great.
Yeah.
But you're here out of a short-term
and you're getting a discount at the end of the day. It's a discounted space.
Yeah.
So
no, that's really interesting. These units I'm looking at have kind of been run in a similar model, but kind of short-term rental. There's the Airbnb model that's truly short-term. And then there's kind of that mid-range of maybe a couple weeks. Someone's here working. Yeah, and I'm leaning more towards that, but it'll be interesting to see how that all shakes
Getting
out.
the furniture will probably be the tough part. I was thinking about that after. I was $10 says we can do this, but we're going to probably doing IKEA. And I don't even know what IKEA's inventory is like, but I'd like to do StrucTube because I find I like their style a little more and it tends to fit the Airbnb-esque style a little better. But I know StrucTube, I tried to get a table for my house and I had to order 4. And the first one showed up was the one I kept.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're all 6 months, 8 months out.
Yeah. Unless, of course, you want to sponsor a StrucTube, in which case you're the best. And
at StrucTube, you are as our amazing.
Yeah. You just have to go and be what do you got in stock? Send it over.
Effectively.
So that's kind of what's new with me. Just plugging away at those. And, I'll get a little test trial because we got that place down the South Shore that is run through the summer months as an Airbnb. So,
yes, your canvas house.
That's the yurt that is adjacent to the main house. Yes, yurt life, baby.
I'll rent it.
You can come by anytime. So yeah, yurt life. Okay, we're gonna dive into some headings. So do you want to just like alternate? You throw a heading at me, I'll throw a heading at you, and we're gonna tackle a lot of topics here in aggressive order.
Yeah, let's do it. I guess I can start. And the first one, I'm got BC here, and I'm just feeling BC because I just came back. I love my time there. It's an amazing place. But Fraser Valley, which includes Vancouver, Burnaby, Whistler, Squamish, which if you're from BC, you obviously know that Fraser Valley is basically the main hub of BC. It's where all the main cities are, majority of the population lives, and that's kind of where it's based out of for population. I'm not saying for mountains or anything about lifestyle, but simply for numbers. Population living and for numbers. And so Fraser Valley saw their volume of sales drop by 35%.
That's number of units transacted.
That's number of units transacted. That is enormous. 35% in drop.
Yeah.
So like they're actual for the year, they're down by 0.8%, but there's a lot of skewing, especially with BC, because the way the cities are all dotted really close to each other and their boundaries touch and tap. So the comparisons are getting a little wonky. But to see that much drop in a place like that, that kind of shows to me that market is extremely speculative.
Also realize that there's a month delay in the reporting on these stats, right? So some of these things that are closing may have actually been transacted 2 months ago. Because I've heard of things with the Simon Fraser area, is that what it's called?
Fraser Valley.
Yeah, Fraser Valley. That they've seen in some cases 10, 15% declines on pretty standardized product where it's like, all right, there's not that much difference between this house and that house, and it's down 10 to 15%.
And this is the weird thing, because we're not there, the stats are still showing that the numbers haven't gone down. And part of me believes that they haven't, because I think a lot of investors own the property, and they're just like, no, I'm just going to keep it at this. I don't really care.
Totally.
I listed for $1 million, didn't get any offers, it's going to sit at $1 million.
This is the stickiness.
I don't
People
need
will
to
not
sell
just
yet.
start giving their home away because, I hear pricing's down, I'll just give my home away for less. They're like, no, let's take it off the market, which contracts supply and then drives back up. But that's really interesting. I know as well, I've heard a couple things anecdotally about people trying to back out of deals in some of these areas in Vancouver because it's a really high price point and they have pretty big deposits here. This is like $50,000 to $100,000 deposit, but they're also buying it at $2 million price point. Where say you made a purchase and the market was 2, you went up to 2.1. Well, now there's been a little bit of a pullback, and a unit in the same area has just gone down to 1.8, right? 300,000, and your rate just went up by 50 basis points, and it's looking like it's going to go up by 100 basis points. All of a sudden, you look at all right, I have a $50,000 deposit, but I have a way bigger mortgage, and the
home's down 300, and my mortgage is up 200. So I'll lose my 50 to save 500.
Yeah. And what are the ramifications of that? Because it's,
and then you start getting into legal battles. But it's weird because on the same thing right now, like again, the stats that we were able to pull, they said they broke another all-time high for pricing in April.
Yep.
Like it's just, and this is kind of what I was just ranting about there when we first opened, is like, this is a different type of recession, and it's going to be really different for housing. And I think those who have might end up panning out okay.
It's
going to be like,
we talked about this in a previous episode about protecting yourself in a seller's market, and it's buy fundamentally sound properties in core areas that cannot be substituted for that easily.
Don't bank on the future.
And also, we've talked a lot about replacement cost. So when you talk about substitution, replacement cost, location, fundamentals, right there, that's how you protect yourself. When you go to a periphery area with a very standardized product that doesn't have an irreplaceable location or isn't a unique enough product that it can't be substituted for something else, and you pay more than the cost it would be to build that unit, you are exposed to a level of risk.
Extremely exposed to a high level of risk.
And we also have to remember that some of these numbers ticking up get really aggressively skewed by Vancouver and Toronto. For example, like nationwide, depending on how you adjust seasonally, they're reporting anywhere between 12 and 25% drop in the number of sales, and a 0.5% to even a 3% drop in the actual sale prices, again, depending on how you measure and adjust. But all of these things get drastically skewed by the major markets. So those markets in Vancouver and Toronto are still up about 16% year over year.
But if you talk to people there, they have a very different view. And I'm already kind of feeling regretful that we didn't make some calls. And I think we will before we get on the next episode. We're going to call a few realtors that we know in both of those cities to get the actual true market feel on the ground. Because I know I have clients, friends, and family that live in Toronto, and we talk to them fairly frequently. And they said it's turning into pandemonium. Like in Toronto, it is diving. Like people are backing out of deals, like you're saying in Vancouver, and they're just like prices are falling off. People are rapidly trying to get out of the houses. People who need to get out are like scared out of their minds, and they're dropping the prices because they need to get them offloaded.
And Toronto's reporting, in some areas down 3.5%, but again, that's really skewed because you have some of these marquee areas that are still going to turn really big numbers. Yep. There's a lag in the reporting, so it's coming out in the wash. But if you just look at all the indicators of what things might be 2 to 3 months from now, you can see the slowdown in transactions. You can see the stagnation of the pricing. But to your point that we made earlier, there's these conflicting forces, which is why if you average all this out, it looks a lot like a leveling as opposed to a correction.
I think realistically it will. Like I think like we're talking about, I think it's going to be a leveling more so. I think you'll have some panic sales that will cause some drops in some of these overinflated markets like we're talking about, Vancouver and Toronto. We're just beating on Vancouver and Toronto. And I think Halifax might be considered a little overvalued now, so we might take some heat. But I wonder if this skews the numbers where new homes, so people who put deposits on new houses a year ago that they're closing today. So technically by stats, those transactions are going through today.
Yeah, top
so
of market.
those could be keeping numbers up, even though all the resale product around them is dropping. They already had made a contract and purchased at $1 million, and now the houses around them are going for $850. Because it's similar to we had on the host, I'll just say Unreserved, and Ryan was talking about how he sold for a builder, and they sold one now for a brand new one for $880 or something. But he said then the resale ones on the street just went for $850 and $820 in the same week.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like that $880 sale was something that was locked in advance as a pre-sale.
Yeah, totally.
And now the resales around them are going for less. And so overall it balances out and says the same numbers.
Right.
But it's not a true indicator of where the market's going.
This is why, boots on the ground realtors, what they're reporting anecdotally that's not yet reflected in the data, it is a slowdown, but it's really nuanced in it. Let's do a fun one. Mm-hmm. So in China, it's a really competitive marriage market. And in some communities, they have these matchmaking corners where effectively, if you're a single person, you go to these corners in your town or neighborhood and try to make a love connection. And a father...
Is that...
What?
Like a corner of the street?
Yeah.
Okay, no, okay, continue.
Yeah, totally. Like...
I think I'm not...
Do we have one of these? We got a couple corners around here you can make a love connection. I love it. All right. Let me finish my news story. This father, it's really competitive. It is because their population numbers and things like that. This father gifted his son 20 real estate properties in order to make him a more appealing groom for potential wife. And they had this picture in the news story of all the deeds. He took the deeds and he hung them out on a string on Matchmaker Corner. And went there
way.
And yeah. And so he's trying to better market his son to get a more desirable bride.
And now people listening are like, that sounds insane. I think it sounds a bit insane, but on the flip side, we do the same shit here. Like, you do.
Wow.
No, you really do. You really do. There's a reason that people drive the shit they drive. They wear the shit they wear. Like the $100,000 watch makes no difference.
I thought you were going to go down the road of like nepotism.
Well, no, but like in all seriousness, like the clothing, like there's no reason. Like a $20,000 shirt's not going to help you do anything. But you're wearing it to show everybody else.
Totally, but it's usually not your dad who bought the shirt for you and then goes, hey, get out there, son.
But indirectly, like no one says it now. But like I look at a lot of people my age, and I'm like, you are like that is generational wealth. So that is from your family. Yeah. That is paying for what you have, and no disregard to the fact that you work really hard. But I think it might be impacting the ability to purchase some of those things, and then that will impact a lot of times who you end up love cornering with.
Oh,
just saying.
I love this topic.
We talk about real estate, but it's just an interesting thought.
Yeah. I mean,
catch me at Windmill Road with my deeds.
Kidding.
I have a girlfriend.
Unsolicited deed pic. Neal's got big D energy. Okay, so there's my light news story. Let's go back to one of your more serious ones.
No, yeah. Mine. I'll go with the light one too. It's not quite as good as that, but I was just gonna talk about the metaverse.
Oh, I love it.
We haven't talked much about the metaverse recently.
No one has.
No one has because it was a news item and it came and went. But we say that in 2021, prices were up on average 700% across the major 4 markets.
In 2021, yeah.
Yeah. And they transacted $500 million.
Yeah.
So like it's worthy of some conversation.
Yeah, totally.
I was researching now, and again, I'm not heavily invested in it because I didn't feel comfortable making the jump yet where I think it's so new and fresh. I do really think it's going to take over, but long story short, I couldn't find stuff to say that the prices have started to fall down yet. But the coins or the tokens that are utilized to purchase the metaverse properties have dropped in value by 90%.
Yeah, because people realize you can't do much else with them other than trade in the NFT space or the metaverse space, and there is a critical demand level for that. But I think those people were transacting with one another.
Yeah.
And the influx of new interest isn't yet there because everyone's getting hammered in their more conventional investments.
In the real world.
In the real world.
In the real world, people are getting hammered. And this is what I've been saying. I've been trying to say this to a lot of my colleagues. And I'm going to say it to everybody that's listening because we value you listening. And again, not financial advice, don't know anything. So don't take it for that. But I honestly believe that part of crypto markets and the stock market are taking a beating because interest rates are going up. But it's just a simple fact of people are starting to feel the pinch on the inflation and their expenses have gone up a bunch and they don't have the expendable cash. Where are they going to come up with expendable cash? They're going to take their non-essential investments, their non-essential assets, and start getting rid of those. And so the very first easiest one that I think people see to get rid of is crypto. Well, I don't think that people feel like that attached to it, and I think they'll sell their crypto first. Then they start to look at like toys, like boats and things like that eventually they'll start selling. But really, they want to start with those items, and I think the last thing they'll ever consider is their house.
Oh, 100%. I think you really nailed that. Especially the last thing they'll ever consider is their house. I mean, also, if people are looking at their portfolio and they want to reposition, they're not going to be like, all right, let's take it out of these conventional saving things and put it in the metaverse right now. Like in this climate, that's not what people are doing.
I'm going to sell all my TD Bank and buy IOTA.
Yeah. So to your point, NFTs are down 64% since the start of the year, which is closely tied to crypto, which is down 1 trillion.
We never addressed NFTs because they had like a massive blowout.
Yeah, they went crazy, and
I feel like we touched it when we talked about NFTs.
Yeah, I talked about like a couple like failed recent sales in NFTs.
NFTs, I'm saying this from a place of like a little bit of ignorance, but from my ignorant position, I feel that NFTs, the technology makes a ton of sense and has a ton of merit.
Yep.
But all the little artworks were a scam for the most part. Like it's like in the real world, like there's art, but not everything is going to be that. Like it's like the .com bubble. Like everyone thought that every website was going to be something amazing. No, but doesn't mean the internet's not good. It doesn't mean that a website's no good. But there's going to be the primary functional websites, and then all the others were just kind of garbage. And I think that's what happened with the NFTs.
Totally.
Like
it's what's going to happen with crypto too, and it happens with all these things. Like if you look around the world, man, there's every sub product that you have. There's typically a Pepsi and a Coke.
Yeah.
Right. Two major players. Sometimes you'll get a third major player. And in the coin space, it seems to make sense that they're going to have to amalgamate at some point. You can't have thousands of different coins for very unique purposes. And this is why Bitcoin has done so well historically, because they were effectively the cryptocurrency equivalent of the US dollar, right? Like there's that one frame of reference that gets worldwide adoption. You can't have 1,000 of them. And there's some like little microcoins that have very unique practical purposes that have a technology component.
It's not the coin though, it's the technology behind them. The coin is like the assignment of it.
So we talked about how about 35 trillion was wiped out from asset wealth, and crypto is down 1 trillion.
Yeah, wow. That's quite a bit when you think about really crypto coming to the scene in the last few years and like asset wealth that you're talking about. Does asset wealth include real estate then?
I think it's markets. Yeah.
Okay, so that would be markets
which have been
around for over 100 years.
Yeah, they can't really quantify the real estate like that, and it'd be way more than that amount.
Yeah, exactly.
Plus. Yeah, so that would be like market asset wealth. So and speaking of Bitcoin, they're down 35% year to date.
You know, I think also one regret I have with all the like NFT stuff, crypto stuff, is being smart about kind of watching the curves, like not getting caught up in the hype, but being like, okay, I understand that maybe NFTs technology is amazing, and realistically, these art pieces aren't actually where the value is. But also having the skills and the understanding that, look, it's going to have a huge run because the general perception and acceptance of them is that they are really extremely valuable. And so being able to make an investment off of that. Because really it's the same as the stock market, but it's more volatile, right? Like they trade on sentiment, they trade on excitement more so than actual value. So it's like they're just super intense. So I wish, but I don't know if you can have the foresight to do that. And I think the problem is it's so flighty that even a news story that you can't predict could absolutely kill your investment in 2 seconds. But it's just, I don't know.
I mean, what you're saying is like, well, gosh, you know, like I wish I had bought low and sold high, but like that's just it's
hindsight's 2020.
Yeah,
but I'm saying in general with all markets. But anyways, moving on.
It's my turn. Another news story.
Yeah, sure.
So a study came out and said that college grads are overestimating their projected salaries by $50,000 a year. So they did this survey of recent college grads who, on average, and this is pretty sad and hilarious, thought that they would be making about $103,000 a year coming out of graduating, and turns out that the average salary is closer to $50,000 for your first job out of graduation. So they were off by a cool 50 G's,
which is 50%.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel bad in some ways, especially if you're in the States, because you're taking on a massive amount of debt.
Yeah.
But I don't know that it's the grad's fault. I feel like I'm blaming the previous gen. Friggin' boomers. If you're listening, I'm just joking, but like in all seriousness,
they're not listening because they're boomers.
But in all seriousness, I feel like the parents really, at least I found this, they will show to like the kids that if you go to college education, you're going to be making a ton of money in no time. And I think then the perception for a lot of people going into it was that this is what it's going to be. And even like I feel like media, like when you watched movies and stuff, they perceive that if you went and had a college education, when you graduated, you're going to be making way more money than everybody else or doing really well immediately. And that's because I think from that era, like I've always heard the stories of like, we got your degree and there'd be a job fair and there'd be 15 offers and you'd pick whatever was the best company for you and the highest paying and this and that. And it's changed now. You go to the job fair and there's 15 people fighting for the same job at that fair and then another 400 online.
We talked about this before when I think I referenced a cartoon that was in the School of Business that I worked at when I was working in economics, and it was a cartoon that had a picture of a cattle ranch, except instead of cattle in it, there was just a bunch of people dressed in suits, and there were 2 farmers that were saying, oh yeah, these MBAs are ready for market. It basically implying that it was a factory farm for MBAs, and you know the implication is that maybe those MBAs aren't worth as much as people are sold on. I've thought about this a lot because I find it really, really interesting. And if you look at generationally, I mean, those boomers are the children of, the World War II couples.
Yep.
And the people, so their parents, that would be my generation's grandparents effectively, secondary education was far from a given. In fact, a lot of people didn't finish high school education at that point in time.
Yeah.
And, they were sold this idea of, it's often referred to as like the American dream.
Yep.
Right. And coming out of the war, there was a pretty significant boom where people could, suburbs became a thing.
Yeah.
And, people could afford these luxuries, and they were convinced that, higher education was going to perpetually be the path towards that. And probably it was for a little while. But then the reality kicked in that universities are a big business, and universities have this really difficult thing to balance where you can't let everyone get a university degree because otherwise they're worth nothing. But you want to get as many people as possible because you charge them a lot of money, and that's how you make their money. And then it kind of goes a little bit further because you create all these people that often go out to market and find they can't make money. And there's a massive divide now on campuses between business, right?
Yeah.
Science is over here doing its own thing.
Yeah.
But there's a real separation between the business students and the arts students.
Yeah.
Left, right, capitalist, socialist. It's now ingrained a pretty significant divide there. And it trickles down to our whole society because now there's a real connection between universities that are really aggressively left-leaning in most cases here in the Western world, and media sources, because a lot of those people who maybe go through universities and go towards the arts, they end up more likely in media circles. And the people who go through the business kind of steer clear of like activism and media and all these things.
The one thing I was going to mention.
I'm dancing around a few things.
You
here.
are dancing around a bunch of different little things.
I don't know if I want to open this can of worms
no,
today. I'm in a good mood. You know?
Same. But I just had a coffee and I'm ready to roll. But I was just going to make the point of, like, you're saying basically, like, they could not allow people to get an education. So yeah, the government basically, the second the government signed on to allow them to take on student loans, then everybody went and got a university education.
Yeah,
and this is
which
kind of a proof of
depreciates the
concept,
value of
which
it.
depreciates the value of it.
Yeah.
And it's not that no people shouldn't have been able to have it, because that would have really separated and caused more divide. But then there needs to be an understanding that we wanted this, and as a whole, our population is more educated and is better for it. But then you need to understand it becomes a devalued proposition that's not necessarily worth it as much to go out and do.
Yeah.
Right?
And I guess if you go back to kind of the history of higher learning, it was not supposed to be about making money. It was supposed to be pursuing knowledge for self-improvement and so on. But, you know, the universities kind of had to engage in this idea of, like, well, go here, we'll get you a job. They advertise, like, our placement rate after university is this. So the purpose of university has changed a little bit. It's now seen as a vehicle purely to enter the job market as opposed to just personal improvement.
Okay, so now we've gone totally, like, digressed. We're all off
How
the
did we
map.
end up on this?
I don't know, but I got to ask you this question then.
Yeah.
Do you think there's more opportunity today or 35, 40 years ago for the previous gen?
I think there is more opportunity today, and people are going
Why?
to hate on that.
Yeah.
I think your ability to do things in a non-conventional way, your
Define.
freedom to do that. I mean, to not have to go to university, right?
Okay.
Like, if we're comparing this to, say, the early 90s,
Yep.
like, you couldn't even get the interview. Like, there was a less focus on practical life
You didn't
experience.
check the box. You just weren't
Yeah,
coming in.
and things are coming back around to, like, no, what can you actually do? Like, what's your actual practical life experience?
Yeah.
Job flexibility, entrepreneurialism. I'm not saying those things didn't exist before, but I think you have the freedom to pursue those things in a way you didn't have before, and then that is multiplied by the technology at your fingertips. So if you talk opportunity, like the opportunity to do something incredible,
Yeah.
I certainly think you have more opportunity now. That's not to say you don't have greater challenges in some respects. Like, you can have more opportunity while also having more challenges, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, there's more people, right? So just like your odds of rising to the top when there are more people is harder,
yeah.
right? But even if you look at, the freedom of women in the workforce, the freedom of visible minorities in the workforce, like, you can't tell me they don't have more opportunities today, which is fantastic. So I do think there's more opportunity and less closed-minded thinking in terms of, like, what a job is and what it means to work for a company. I mean, people literally would work for the same company for 40 years. No one can tell me that that's opportunity. Like, I had the opportunity to work for one company for 40 years. That's...
So you say there's more challenges, but would you say... I don't know.
I don't even know if I'm convinced there's more challenges.
I was gonna say, because it's like, maybe it's different industry, because it's like, if you go into maybe like software spaces and in new spaces, there's not that many people to compete with because it's a new space. And did those people who succeeded in the previous generation go into new spaces and make that leap at that time? And people were kind of like, what are you doing? And now they're let's say a monopoly or a strong house in that area.
Yeah, totally.
Is it I feel like it's a similar thing, and I'm with you. I think people are going to disagree in a lot of ways. And yes, the true fact of, like, a lot of things are way more expensive right now, and the bare minimum wages and the average
People
income.
act like things were so great in the 80s, man. They were not. Things were not great in the early 90s. Like, there was a lot of times where things weren't great.
That, and like, it's, yes, the baselines are more expensive, but there's also an opportunity to make a lot more money a lot quicker.
Totally.
In different ways. Like, I don't think they had the opportunity to do this. And like you're saying, there's all these unique systems now that are in place that can allow people to do pretty much anything. Like, you know what I mean? Like, become a taxi driver through Uber in 2 seconds, or become a short-term rental host through Airbnb in 2 seconds. Like, and yet you don't need to own even a vehicle to do Uber. There's companies that will release to you that you can run and use to do Uber. You don't need to own a property to do Airbnb. You can rental arbitrage through another property. And so if you have $500 to sign a lease, you can start Airbnb-ing a property.
Yeah. And I mean, it's less bad, just to kind of backtrack a little bit, but, in the States, those universities, unless you're going to like a community college, like those major universities are very, you know, in a lot of cases like old money, nepotism, gatekeepers, elitism, you know, they're not necessarily welcoming to everyone by any stretch, right? So again, the value that they, you know, the purpose of those universities, I think, just aren't really what they should be. If you have kind of a romantic idea of what university should be, but
Yeah. Anyways, I think we went on a huge digression there.
Okay,
Going back to real estate, what else do you have for headlines? Because I want to talk about.
Corner. Where are we here?
I have two other things I want to talk about.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else?
No, give me your
Okay.
heading. I got something else, but you give me your heading first.
Okay, well, the first one, I was just going to talk about the States. So I've been digging into the States, and I talked about it on here before. I want to invest in the States, so I try to dig in and see where their market's going. They are still showing no signs of slowdown. They have had the rate increases, but they are not showing a sign of slowdown right now. And I don't know why. Usually Canada lags the States, and we follow them in a lot of ways. But in this case, it's almost like our economy is being a lot more cautious. And I don't know if it's the banks that are starting to pump the brakes here or what exactly is going on.
No, their rates are up too.
But
Their rates are up big time,
I mean more so the banks and their approvals and their advising, because it's like they're not approving as quickly here. Like that's a big thing I've heard. Like they're already starting to pull back on different approvals. They're being a little more stringent. They're wanting higher down payments already. Versus like, are they down there where it's more privatized? Are they being a little bit more loose with it?
Right.
And because it doesn't really matter if the rates go up, if the banks keep approving you and throwing the money out, people are just going to keep taking it, right?
I think there's got to also be something to be said that people maybe underestimate how much more dense and large the states are than Canada, right?
Infinitely.
Like trying to, like we look at our market and it's effectively, all right, there's what's going on in Vancouver, what's going on in Toronto, and then kind of what's going on everywhere else. And those two markets dramatically skew our data. In the U.S., there's just more markets, and it's so nuanced between states.
Huge. They have so many massive markets.
It would be really disingenuous to try to make a sweeping statement about their market so far.
Yeah, but it's not even like a couple cities are starting to slow down or anything. Like they had, all I could find is maybe one or two cities have a bit of slowdown, but not really much in general. Like there's just, it's still a very optimistic outlook, it seems like there, but maybe we'll see that change over time. But they're also, for the first time, facing that inventory crunch in a lot of places, which they didn't have in 2008, 2007.
Right.
They didn't have this inventory crunch before. They had a ton of homes then. This time, same thing. Construction costs are up, inflation's up. They didn't build as many properties. And so they're also facing this inventory crunch, which, as we were talking before, might be supporting this a lot more.
Yeah.
So in this recession, maybe housing's not the driver this time. Housing slows down a bit, goes down a little bit, but other things will take a massive beating.
Yeah. Speaking of that and talking a little bit about housing and construction starts, I said earlier construction starts are up a little bit because that's a product of the time of year. But lumber year to date, right? Some of the lumber futures and stuff, they've come down a fair bit, which is exciting for people looking to build. There's such a backlog of demand, though, that I think that'll still
Gas
stay
just
pretty
dropped.
high for a while. Gas came down today, but we'll see what tomorrow brings. And the consumer price index, which is a bundled good measure to reflect
Missing some things, but
inflation. Yeah, it's been rocketing along, but finally, if this makes sense, it's slowing down its pace of increase. Right, so it's starting to round off at the top, which is promising because that is meant to be a reflection of inflation. However, it doesn't include a lot of things.
Energy, housing.
So that's why there's some people who think that our actual inflation is quite a bit higher than we say it is. But anyway, but the consumer price index rounding and slowing down is a positive sign. But the producer price index, which is the inverse, all your input products, that has also kind of leveled off a little bit. Your things like your lumber, your petroleum products, your the goods that go into the products that are then sold, that has started to slow down a little bit as well. So promising signs there for if you're looking at trying to slow inflation. So we've got a little bit of time left here. Again, thanks for listening, guys. If you listened to this whole point and you haven't pressed the like button or the subscribe, please do it now.
Subscribe thing, do it.
Boop, boop, boop. I got two questions that I'm going to get into here for Neal, and I want to hear your thoughts because we've had them. People asking there both on the buying side and the selling side that, hey, we're listening to what you're saying. There's concern about rates. All indications the rates are going to go up. The market might be slowing a little bit. Remains to be seen. Should we wait?
To buy or to sell?
Let's start with to buy.
Oh God, I'm already half torn. So as an investor, again, if the numbers make sense really make sense. I don't mean like, okay, I'm breaking even potentially if I get the rents to this makes sense. I mean like even if things pull back a bit, rents pull back a little bit, this place still makes sense. I think you should buy. I really and truly do. I don't think banking on waiting for potential drops is a good idea because, like we've talked about, I don't foresee it coming just for a simple fact of there's not going to be enough construction. There's still going to be a huge crunch on demand on supply. Sorry. The other thing that's also dependent on your market. Some markets where they're overinflated, where you're paying based on a potential comparable value to a condo, that I'm not super keen on.
Right.
But if you're buying it based on numbers and like commercial financing, traditional like financing based on income, that's the ones that as long as they're good, I think it's still a buy.
So you're saying as an investor, you're proceed with caution, but proceed nonetheless?
Exactly.
Okay. I'll maybe take the residential, traditional single-family home purchaser. My thought is this. If you're waiting for some bottom in the market to try to time the market, you have to look at why is this happening? Well, it's happening in large part because of the interest rate.
Yeah.
Right? So, yes, you may save a little bit of money on the purchase price of that home, but if you're paying significantly higher for it because of the increased interest rate, your effective cash flow in and out month to month, is going to be negligible.
And your effective payment, pay what you paid for the house effectively is.
Yeah. Like you're gonna eat it on interest. So I think if saving $70,000, excuse me, or $30,000 on the house ends up costing you more than the equivalent payment, which would be on $30,000, what's your mortgage payment on that? 25, 26, like $150, right?
$150.
If your interest rate goes up by $200, the saving of the $30,000 doesn't matter much.
Yep.
The other thing is, what are you looking at your home as? Are you looking at it as a short-term investment you want to flip, or are you looking at it as the place you want to be for the next, 5 to 10 years?
Yep.
Because if it's the latter, I do believe that trend is going to remain upwards.
Yep.
And there's something to be said to just getting where you want to go, right? What are you going to do? Like wait the 12 months and see how it shakes down? Be like, all right, things have bottomed out, so I'm going to buy now. Now interest rates are through the roof, but whatever, I'm going to roll with it. And I saved a bit of money on the purchase price, but I didn't get to live in that home for the last year.
The one thing I'll point in there, you might get to be a little bit more selective. Like if you haven't seen a house come up in the neighborhood you want, you might see it come up now.
Yeah.
So there might be a chance there to also get in. And again, do it now because again, I really do believe, and so I'd say you believe the same. It's going to continue to go again, and then you're going to be kicking yourself in the butt if you don't get into that area.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm still, I still believe there's all kinds of reasons to buy a home if it makes sense for your family.
Buy.
It's a buy.
Selling.
Yeah. What are you telling people out there that are thinking of selling?
So I'll do investors again. Actually, to be honest with you, investors never really ask to sell. Very, very infrequently are they asking to sell. It's some of them that feel like they're topping out the market might get an opportunity to do so, but I don't necessarily see it as a sale unless you really need to sell. In general, I think you still have a strong proposition. If you need to sell because it's not making you money and you're not interested in carrying it, or you need that last little bit of lift out of it, then make the sale. You'll get a good price. But I honestly think that the values of rentals and good fundamentals, will continue to rise. So I don't think selling today you're gonna look back and like, I made the right decision. I think you'll look back in 10 years or 5 years and be like, I wish if I had the ability to keep that, I kept that.
I mean, my answer is the same as it always is when it comes to selling stuff. Don't sell anything unless you need that money and have a specific plan for that money to put it somewhere else that's going to return a higher investment.
Yeah.
Why would you sell anything if you didn't need to?
Yeah.
Right? The only reason to sell something is because it allows you the freedom to do something even better.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't have that without selling it. That's the only time ever to sell as an investment property.
Yeah.
If you want to get more nuanced, there's a lot of small scale multis out there right now, like little guys, and those aren't doing great in the market right now.
Yeah.
Because the buyers for those are more likely first, young people starting out.
I thought they were doing good.
They were for a while.
Like I thought the price per. Have you been finding it recently? It's been kind of.
Oh man, the market was saturated for a while with them. Hopefully, it's coming back around here. But there was one point in time where they dumped like 30 of them on the market in 2 weeks, and
yeah, that definitely had an impact on
the
things.
interest rate went up. Next question.
Yeah,
let's get in this one. Fixed or variable?
I'm a huge variable person. Again, I'm speaking as an investor. I always go variable for the simple fact that if you're going to be making moves, and you never know when you're going to make moves, whether it's a refi or you need to sell or whatever it may be. If you do fixed, you're going to get hammered. Like you're going to get hammered. And so I always go variable for that option. The only time that I'm going fixed is if I'm like long term, I've done the whole renovation, the rents are capped out, I'm not touching this property for another 5-10 years. Then I'll go fixed and I'll try and do like a CMHC product at a low interest rate. So I would still say go with that path. But like there's a lot of talk of the rates coming back and cooling off by the end of the year. Mm-hmm. But I'm also like, I'm not necessarily as super rate sensitive as maybe I should be, but I don't feel that the half point for most investors is going to be the make or break. Yeah, okay, fine. If you have $100 million or $200 million, it's not going to be make or break, but it is a massive amount of money. But I don't foresee it for a lot of people being enough that it really should be the difference maker. And I think there is some merit in taking a fixed, even right now. So you finish the property, you have it stabilized. Taking a fixed might give you some strength. And if you really believe that they're going to go down, do a 1 year.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But if you're still working on a property, or you just bought it, or you plan to do something with it, or you're planning to make a move in the next year and you don't know that you might need some extra capital, do a variable.
Well, there's a couple things that I look at. One, I'm variable as well. I said this on another episode or the next episode. Like, I wanted to get a hoodie made up that says I'm sticking with variable. When the banks set their rate relative to the Bank of Canada overnight rate and all that, and they add their speculation and their meat on that bone for those fixed rates, right? They say, okay, looking at the trend of where this can go, we've got to push up to try to account for the fact that in the next few years, if things continue on this trend, like there could be higher rates. I happen to think that, so they're effectively building in the speculative 3%.
The rate hike's coming.
Yeah, they kind of have already built that into today's pricing.
Yep.
And I think even if we push up against that, so the Bank of Canada rate right now is, I think, 1.25.
I think it's higher than this.
No, I think it's 1.25. But there's speculation that it could go to 3. So the banks out there, they're not dumb. They're looking at that and saying, all right, so you're telling me this Bank of Canada rate could go up to there. We need to build that into today's posted fixed rates. I think if we go up anywhere close to that, we're going to pull back shortly thereafter, right? So I feel like they're building in that premium on these rates right now, and they're going to continue to do so. But I do think that long term, weathering this initial storm, the remaining years of your term, which might be 2 to 5 years, right? Like, you can see the benefit of the variable rate.
In response to that, though, I think the banks play some trickery. And so you'll...
No.
Yeah. Who would have thunk? Who would have thunk it that the multi-billion-dollar corporations,
How
if not
dare
trillion-dollar corporations, have some games being played? But I feel like they will bait people. They're like, well, a 2 year is 2% and a 3 year is 6%. And you're like, what? And so you're like, oh, obviously I'm going to do a 2 year. No big deal. But I think that's them speculating that in 2 years, the rate's going to be enormous and like way higher. So when you go to renew in 2 years, you're going to get hooped. Like, I feel like they bait you with certain term lengths because sometimes the rate growth doesn't make sense on those fixed at all, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, they're trying to fix you into a certain period and line you up basically for failure. Like, they're trying to line you up with when rates are high. So when you hit your renewal, you have to take that expensive money.
Yeah, yeah. And again, like, you can cushion yourself if that's what they're thinking. If they're betting on rate increases being substantial 2 years from now, then maybe, again, variable.
And they can choose where the rate increases are going to be. Like, at the end of the day, they're saying, look, a ton of people are going to want to lock their rates in right now because what's going on. So they're having a shitload of people come in right now, lock their rates in. So they can push. They can be like, all right, we basically know that we have 4 million mortgages that are going to renew in the year of 2026.
Right.
And they can project to have their rates be up a few points.
point.
So they can pre-project basically how their income growth is going to expect. They can say, okay, out of that, we're going to lose 20% of our customers because the rates are higher. But because we pumped it up this much, we're actually going to end up making this much more money.
Yeah.
So try and do your own, I think, your own
The other
take
thing-
before your advisor at the bank gives it to you.
Yeah, the other thing that some people, they're panicking about their variable rate. Different lenders do different things, but some of the major lenders in Canada, they fix your payment regardless of your variable rate. So say you have a variable-based product and your mortgage payment is, I don't know, $1,500 a month, just for really easy numbers. Early days, you might be like $750 principal, $750 interest. You know,
Good old days.
right? Like, where it's half and half. As that rate creeps up, they are going to keep you at $1,500, but your principal might shrink down to like $550, and your interest payment creep up to $950. But your actual month to month won't change with some lenders. So there's another reason to be like, all right, if you are leaning towards variable, you also kind of want to hedge your bets a little bit, shop around, get a variable product that actually fixes the payment, just not the weighted between the principal and the interest. So
We are non-financial advisors.
no, consult your mortgage broker,
and
man.
We know nothing. Consult your mortgage broker.
Yeah.
But just obviously do a little bit of background research yourself, and not to hate on bank advisors, but they work for the bank. They work for the bank.
Yeah.
So advice might be slightly skewed.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, and even whether they know it or not, right? Like, they just have the options of the products in front of them, and they don't necessarily know if there's any rationale behind it. But all right, that's everything for today. Again, last chance. If you've listened this way, you obviously like it. So press the like button, press the subscribe, whatever, all that stuff. If you can share it with someone, we really appreciate it.
Yeah, we appreciate you guys listening, everyone in support. It's amazing. A few guys saying hi out there when we're out walking around. Super fun, pumps us up.
Yeah.
If you want to hear something in specific, let us know. Keep shooting us messages. You guys have been great about it. Like I've said it on the last couple episodes, more and more messages are coming in, and we love it. If you think there's someone you want to see as a guest too, I think that'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Shoot us a message. If we get a few people who say like we want to see this person on there, we'll try and reach out and see by some chance if we can bribe them on with a sweet Boxing Rock mug to come on and chat with us. So
Go Wanderers.
Exactly. Thanks
and
again.
listen, guys, keep that big deed energy up.
I was gonna make a comment about the deed, but I'm just avoiding it. I'll see you in the corners.
Oh gosh.
Bye.
Thanks so much for watching the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. Don't forget to subscribe. But also check us out on Instagram and TikTok. You can find all the links below. Thanks again for checking us out.
When I was broke, I had rich habits. When I was broke, I had rich habits.